Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jury Candelario. I am Director of APIT, a Division of Special Service for Groups. Thank you for joining us tonight. Earlier this month, APIT began a mental health awareness campaign called My Journey to Wellness Starts With Me. It featured some of our campaign ambassadors, including Laverne Cox, Margaret Cho, and Wilson Cruz. We focused on areas of wellness, self-care, and therapy. And we also highlighted vulnerable populations like the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities, as well as a diverse intersection of queer folks, including trans men. Tonight, we will solely focus on people living with HIV. But before we introduce our distinguished panel, our panelists, let's hear a little bit about the Mental Health Awareness Campaign. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Jake Weinrob, our Senior Clinical Program Manager. Take it away, Jake.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So my name is Jake Weinrob. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I serve as our Senior Clinical Program Manager at APIT. I wanted to thank Jury, our Division Director, as well as our Senior Manager of Strategic Communications, Jasmine Creighton, and also our staff member, Jimmy Sianipar, for helping produce these panels. I also wanted to thank all of our staff. Throughout the pandemic, we have stayed open as an essential service, and I really appreciate our staff, working with us while we implemented the policies and procedures to keep running. I know that our clients really appreciate having us still available and still working and providing those services every day, so thank you. Our mental health awareness campaign was actually inspired by, we had a gala for our Orange County location, a 30th anniversary gala, and we had Laverne Cox speak at the event, and she shared with us some of her mental health journey and experience, a little bit of what she was going through, and we were actually able to have her to our office to shoot a PSA with us. So I'm gonna share my screen and show this PSA now. Laverne, can you tell us about your process seeking mental health services?
So I went to the therapist, and it turns out I needed therapy. Once I got into therapy, I realized that the bullying I experienced as a kid, the emotional abuse, the sexual abuse I had experienced as a child, I hadn't dealt with any of it, that I was in denial about all of it, and that it was affecting me. I thought that I had this elaborate cover. I acted like everything was fine and that I knew everything because I was smart and I thought I was cute. And I was in so much pain that I didn't even know how to deal with. If it weren't for therapy, like the success that has come to me, I would have sabotaged it. Like this is the thing, there are blessings, I think, that the universe has for us. And if we have not done the work to be able to receive those blessings, I believe we'll sabotage them. And so therapy has been crucial for me to be able to feel worthy to receive the blessings that the universe has for me. My quest for wellness starts with me.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our facilitator for our event tonight. James Q. Simmons is a board-certified nurse practitioner, on-air medical expert, and doctoral candidate at UCLA. He also holds a Bachelor's of Science in Broadcast Journalism, a Master's of Science in Nursing, and has extensive multimedia hosting expertise and 10 years of hospital-based critical care experience. Earlier this month was also National Nurses Week, and James is a proud member of the most trusted profession in America, 18 years running. James has curated the online social media health community Ask the NP, Everything You Were Too Scared to Ask Your MD. This is a safe space on social media where the LGBTQ community can get real, relatable, and reliable information to empower their health. James is currently guest co-host of the nationally syndicated talk radio program Drop the Subject, heard in more than 36 US markets on the largest LGBTQ radio network, Channel Q. So turn it over to James. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jake. And welcome to everyone who has joined this session and is watching right now. Welcome also to all of our panelists. You know, we have done this. This is the last of 4 panels that we are doing during May being Mental Health Awareness Month. And we've kicked off the other panels by doing this sort of breathing exercise. And I wanna do this one last time with everyone. And it's an opportunity for all of us to sort of just connect and level set and be really present in this space before this conversation we're about to have. So the panelists, if you will join me, please, everyone watching, if you will just take one big breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. We learned with Scott Turner Schofield last time that if you then connect that exercise with this hand motion right here, you create this like psychosomatic connection, this connection to your body with this. So I'm gonna have us all do this as well. You just make this circle like this with your fingers. And one more breath, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Thank you all for that. I really appreciate it. So this is how the evening is gonna go a little bit. I get the pleasure of reading the bios and a little bit of background about the individuals you see on your screen right now. And then I have some scripted questions to kind of kick off the conversation. But those of you who have been on these panels before, or those of you who have seen me host before or done throughout all of May, we kind of let the conversation take us where it goes. And sometimes those are not scripted questions, but it is always very, very good conversation. And then I will leave time at the end, probably around 6 o'clock. So in a little less than an hour from now, I'll leave time for us to answer your questions. So those of you who are watching, get your questions ready. You can put them in the Q&A anytime the mood strikes you, put a question in there. And then Jake and I will go through the questions and we'll look at those questions. And about 6 o'clock or so, we'll start taking your questions for about a half an hour. Very good. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And this idea of mental health can sometimes be vague or kind of a buzzword. And I especially feel like right now, during this pandemic, during COVID-19, everyone is talking about this. But some individuals just might feel like something is off and they don't know how to reach out. They don't know where to start. And with this panel, we're really hoping to try to bring voices and experiences forward to help all of us, regardless of our circumstances, our identity, our serostatus, any of that, to better understand what a mental health journey can look like. So as most LGBTQ plus people, and especially for our queer siblings living with HIV, we are aware of the disproportionate ways our communities are impacted by world events like this COVID-19 pandemic. Each of our panelists have personally or professionally been exposed to these issues, and we are super, super excited to have them here today. Our first panelist that you will see there is DeMarco Majors. DeMarco, hello and welcome. DeMarco broke ground in openly dealing with prejudice and homophobia in the world of professional sports as the only pro basketball player to ever come out before retirement. He is now a spokesman for gay athletes, and in 2008, he was named one of Out Magazine's top 100 most influential gay men and women. Beyond sports, Majors has also enjoyed a career in acting and modeling with many credits, including commercial campaigns for PrEP, and has also graced the cover of HIV Plus magazine as an advocate for the HIV/AIDS community. Currently, Majors is finishing his first book and is focused on developing 2 new empowering shows called Struggle, Strive, Succeed, and Higher Love with co-host producer Ronnie Kroll. Thank you for being here, DeMarco.
Thank you so much. Nice introduction.
Well, you know, it's on you. You did all that. Nancy Shearer. Hi, Nancy. For more than 20 years, Nancy Shearer has been an activist in the HIV field. As a member of SSG APAIT's Community Advisory Board, she has been heavily involved in the planning and implementation of several programs geared toward HIV-positive individuals, including a monthly psychosocial support group for HIV-positive women, feedback on key services needed for older adults living with HIV, and overall quality assurance of the agency's programs and services. Nancy, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Dr. Neva Chaupette is a licensed psychologist who serves as the full-time project director of a mobile medical clinic that provides free and comprehensive HIV, hepatitis A, B, and C, and STD services to at-risk individuals. Dr. Chaupette is a consultant to AIDS Healthcare Foundation, assisting physicians with the mental health and addiction needs of their patients. Dr. Chaupette has worked in the field of substance abuse and HIV since 1988 and earned her doctorate in psychology from Pepperdine University in 1992. Dr. Chaupette, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And last but most certainly not least, Miss Valerie Spencer, the Reverend Valerie Spencer, has focused her career on health disparities as it relates to the LGBTQ plus community for over 2 decades. That is 20 years, y'all. She is a behavioral health therapist at APAIT and the creator of Holistic Empowerment Institute, an organization which centers on empowerment on a social, cultural, and spiritual basis for LGBTQ plus communities. Valerie has also recently become an ordained, see, I caught up with it, interfaith minister from One Spirit Interfaith Seminary. Reverend Spencer, thank you for being with us.
Good evening, everyone, and good evening to you, James.
Well,
I trust that everyone is well.
So, you know, the first question, I think in particular, you know, there is another layer to having HIV and being part of the LGBTQ plus community and talking about mental health and race and ethnicity. And, you know, the buzzword around that is intersectionality, right? What is the intersectionality that everyone is dealing with in that sense? But in particular, Nancy DeMarco, I guess I kind of want to start there because this panel is specifically for individuals who are either activists in the HIV and AIDS community or living with HIV AIDS. How has that in particular impacted your overall wellness journey and your mental health journey? DeMarco, I'll pick on you first.
Well, how HIV, well, first, you have to start with the diagnosis and dealing with the, first the conversation that you have with someone that, you know, is sharing with you of what's happening. And from that space, from wherever you are, from going from your home to the actual clinic or wherever you went to get tested, at those times, you know, that creates a trauma, a fear, a shame. And once you've been diagnosed, that doesn't go away, especially, you know, and, you know, not just to pick on the topic, but, you know, being a man of color from the Midwest, being a part of the Bible Belt as well, with a set of traumas, of control, of manipulation, because the first things that happen to you is you remember people saying to you, you know, if you're gay, you're going to go to hell and you deserve to die. So you have to, you deal with that internal. For me, I was able to learn how to, through trial and error, through a lot of trial and error, but I had to learn what my triggers, my trauma, and what success looked like being HIV positive to get me to my triumph. That was the first things first, was figuring out what were those triggers. Why do, you know, how does this hurt me? How does this show up? What happens to my faith when pain shows up? Do I abandon my faith? What is that? What do I really stand for? What do I stand on? Who am I? So I had really a lot of introspection, a lot of work. And even during this time, as you know, during this COVID time, you know, I've actually had to circle back, you know, because when you're quarantined, your mental health starts to play on you. And I am a person who, you know, I deal with depression. You know, I've been diagnosed with depression, anxiety last year with schizophrenia. So I am one of those people that really heavily deal with my mental health, my spirituality. And then on top of that, you know, my HIV. HIV gave me an opportunity to actually dull the voice in my head and actually speak, because I found out who I truly was, aside from my diagnosis, because my diagnosis was not my identity. And for a lot of us, it can become your identity in the very beginning because you don't have the tools or you're afraid of the resources. And when you go to a clinic, because I was fortunate enough to have Callan Lord in New York, but you're afraid to speak to someone because that person doesn't look like you. So the struggle looks different. So you don't realize that you can talk to anybody, but when you talk to people in the street, what ends up happening to you, because I know it happened to me, that I ended up trauma bonding with people that were also positive, that had a negative response to becoming positive. So my mental health ride was very much important, but it also gave, once I came into an awareness that it wasn't my identity, that awareness cultivated the courage that I have today to be able to say, you know, I'm DeMarco Majors, this is what's a part of me, but I also am these other things too. So that's how my mental health journey has been able to be a very intricate piece into grooming and growing and knowing who I am before anybody else can label me. Because I would go in front of the mirror 10 times and tell myself that I love me and then I trust me. And when I leave today and get beat up by the world and show back up at home, I may only have 2 I love you left, but guess what? I still gotta love you. So that's been my journey.
It's so tremendous that you speak also about not only loving yourself, which I think is something we all sort of talk about when it comes to mental health, but trusting yourself. DeMarco, I think that was really powerful. You saying that, in that, you know, all of us understanding that all of these different identities that we have do not define us, but they are part of us. But then trusting ourselves with that, and trusting ourselves with understanding how we can navigate the world best for us. And sometimes we don't even trust ourselves to do that. You know, Nancy, I wonder about the sort of that concept of trusting yourself and how different identities have played into particularly individuals who are living with HIV in terms of initiating a wellness journey or initiating that mental health journey. Can you speak to that?
Yes. Well, I was diagnosed in 1997, and that's when all the protease inhibitors started. And I found out I was positive when I put myself in a treatment for 90 days. And I stayed sober for that amount, 9 months. And after 9 months, I decided, you know, I'm going to die anyway, so I'm going to have fun, but it didn't work out, and my life just got worse. And there's a lady that told me that if I ever want to get sober again, that they have a place for drug and alcohol and HIV clinic. And so I called that lady, and guess who that lady is? Dr. Chaupette. I've known her, and I'm 22 years sober today.
Oh,
you know, and
today, congratulations.
every year I
Nancy.
call her and tell her that I'm still sober. You know, and you know, being HIV positive, it goes up and down. You know, some days I'm okay, some days I'm not. But what helps me is I do a lot of volunteer work. I needed to be with people that are dealing the same issues. And that's the only way I can explain myself, because if I just read papers or news and everything, it's not enough. I need to see people. I need to know that they're doing the same thing, what they're doing to promote themselves, what they're doing to keep themselves healthy. You know, and that's what I do. And that's why I volunteer, because, well, like for me, I have many hats that I wear. I am an API, I am a woman, and I'm also heterosexual. And those 3 are very hard. There are too many programs, especially for, you know, Asians and heterosexuals. And so I try to focus on those, because I know I have a voice and I need to be heard. These people need a voice, but they're afraid to come out. So I am the one that have to do it. And by doing so, I get to help myself, and I get to live happy, because I know I have a purpose.
Thank you, Nancy. And congratulations, by the way. And you know, that's a theme. You say purpose right at the end there. That's a theme that I think has come up sort of multiple times in these mental health conversations we've had throughout the month of May. And I think it's really powerful that is a theme that kind of continues to come up, is that this purpose, and that you knowing, you know, just like DeMarco being able to trust himself, you knowing that you needed to be around people, like these were the things that you needed to do to help, you know, survive and cope. And Dr. Chaupette, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to, I kind of want to go on this theme of purpose in particular, and how you know, right now, particularly individuals who are, like we talked about, at a myriad of intersections, particularly with carrying a diagnosis of HIV, and in COVID-19, then if purpose is so key and important, sometimes it's really difficult for us to find a purpose right now when we're all essentially in quarantine.
I think that the easiest thing for me to say, if the question is directed to me, right, James?
Please, yes.
Okay, is because so many of us have had to find a way to live authentically against extraordinary odds. We're sort of have a degree of inoculation against current individuals in power who want to remind us that we are less than, that we should be embarrassed and ashamed of who we are.
Mm.
The assault on our own authenticity at the time of COVID is compounded by the representation by the people in power now that we are and should be victims.
Mm.
And for those of us who have lived our lives open, honest, authentically, with self-awareness, we reject them. But once again, we face another set of perpetrators.
Mm.
So aside from the virus, which is problematic enough, but thank goodness so far I haven't seen it in any of my patients, the COVID-19.
Fantastic.
Which is, you know, I think speaks to maybe some speculative on my part, of course, likelihood that the immune system in most of my positive patients is very sophisticated and can kind of manage inflammation and assault better than those of us who maybe are not living with HIV and taking antiretrovirals for it. So many of my patients, and at this point in my career, it's thousands, mostly everyone living with HIV, psychiatric struggles. I see a tremendous amount of PTSD from the shame that we were told we were supposed to have because we were less than, and that we brought shame to the family because we're gay or bisexual or trans. And then, of course, all the other stuff that goes along with, you know, why we got HIV, which again is not accurate. It's an illness. Doesn't have anything to do with sexual orientation.
Right.
So for many of my folks at this point in time, they are struggling not with their HIV, and I tell all my patients, you're not going to die from HIV. I'm just telling you. The original sins are going to kill you. And those are pretending to be something you're not living authentically, not allowing yourself to accept that you have, unfortunately, probably genetically inherited a psychiatric disorder, in addition to the other psychiatric disorder known as addiction, which comes in lots of forms. And the form is not the problem. Methamphetamine is a problem, but it is not the reason that people get consumed by it. It's the presence of the disease that has brought them to be hyper attached to an entity that is almost acting as a transitional object of attachment, because many of us, our attachments judged us, betrayed us, were ashamed of us, and we looked outside of the traditional attachments to find a way to have purpose and to go above and beyond what we were told we were going to be, which is ashamed, bringing shame to the family, being less than, a non-contributor to society, and all the wounds that we have from the programming that was unfortunately given to us by people who gave us life in many cases. So Right now, with the intersections of mental illness and addiction, which is a psychiatric illness, my clients like to tell me, Doc, not an addict. If I'm just, I'll clean up my language, but basically I'm just a
That's okay.
drug addict.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to tell me that's okay, right? But
Listen, we are here for real talk tonight.
okay,
So
here's the real talk. So my folks are burdened with illnesses. That does not make them less than. It does not make them inadequate. It makes them, it drives them to become more self-accepting. And for a lot of the family members who often want to isolate them as the problem child, it allows me to introduce them to the fact that most psychiatric disorders have some genetic predisposition. And if it's normalized in a family, because the family members like to tell me, oh, we're all good. I'm thinking, no, you're not.
Nope.
You guys haven't been good for a long time.
Right.
So speaking the truth has freed up a large number of my patients and helping them understand that crack cocaine did not make them an addict. Methamphetamine did not make them an addict. More likely, it's the prevalence of the disease in their genetics, in their family of origin, who of course normalized it. And for most of my folks, they're more willing and ready, usually, to acknowledge their struggle with addiction and less knowledgeable and less ready to deal with the probability that that addiction is also co-occurring with another psychiatric disability. Depression, PTSD, bipolarity. I see a lot of bipolarity in the world of HIV because the hypersexuality attached to bipolarity, particularly the manic phase, will drive a grandiosity and the belief, the false belief that if I'm going to get HIV, I would have already had it, which is really fits the delusional thinking, but is not inaccurate in science and fact. So right now, most of the patients that I'm seeing are struggling more with feeling that they have another perpetrator in their world that has extraordinary power that they didn't choose, who is abusing them from afar with a ton of power, to the point where some of them see it as a substitute for their original perpetrators, whether it was sexual or emotional violence or, you know, the long list of trauma. So mostly what I'm dealing with right now, and I always tell my clients, okay, quarantina does not mean crystal methamphetamine. The Tina that's not what this is about.
Different Tinas,
Different
right?
Tinas, yeah, yes. So I'm spending a lot of telehealth time talking to my patients about how far they've come, how much they have to be proud of. And like the former perpetrators, this too will pass. And helping them understand that the temptation to use right now is going to be substantial, because if you're alone with your head and you don't have a good recovery program, usually the disease wins. So this isolation has been, I've increased my contact with them. I have them texting me often, usually once a day in some cases. And I'm usually having a twice a week phone contact with them for therapy to assist them with not getting focused on what they don't have, but what they do have, which is extraordinary power, a great sense of accomplishment, and that we too can get through this.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Dr. Chaupette. You know, Valerie, I think this was kind of a concept that I think a couple weeks ago on a panel, you talked similarly to the concept, and if I'm misspeaking, please correct me, but about this sort of concept of of the power that you do have, of wherever you are in your situation, that you can start a mental health journey, a mental wellness journey. You can control the controllables in the situation that you are in. And I that was really powerful. That's really sat with me for a couple of weeks, actually, Valerie. And I just wondered if you, sort of piggybacking off of what Dr. Chaupette just said, if you had thoughts more about this, like, you know, controlling the controllables and being where you are.
So, yes, and again, good evening. I could listen to Dr. Chaupette all day.
I know, right? I was like, I don't have any more questions, Dr. Chaupette. You just keep going.
I could just sit here
I'm
like
right
this.
here.
My point is that what I tell my clients, particularly those who are challenged by the COVID drama, by their own HIV issues, and by their own addiction dramas, that there are very learned people, educated people, that can deal with the facts of COVID, such as how many deaths, how many people contracted the virus today, all of those things. There are epidemiologists and people who are dealing with that. Let's get you centered on what is true. And what is true for you is that you're resilient. Now let's break that apart. That means you have always had the ability to face some sort of concussive force and bounce back from that, right? Perhaps with a wound, perhaps with a scrape, but you are back. And so the affirmation that and to your point, yes, I try to tell my clients, let's focus on the pieces that are within the seat of power that we can sit in, right? We can wear our masks. We can wash our hands. We can attend our 12-step meetings if that's what we have to do. We can take our HIV meds if that's what we have to do. We can keep our therapy appointments. And an affirmation that I started purely selfishly with myself because I was over here going crazy, thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna catch COVID. And in the middle of the night, Spirit just sort of calmed me. And these words came to me right in this moment. I am alive and I am well. Supernatural, ancestral healing powers surge through my body. They are in me and they are all around me. I am okay. And so it is. And so I give my clients that and I tell them to play with it, you know, make it in your own tongue. But when I feel myself getting that heated breath, that activated breath, I try to pull myself into a place that I can control. I have been wearing my mask. I am washing the golden caramel off of my hands.
Don't wash it all off. It's too pretty.
I'm trying my best. Thank you. I'm trying my best. And most importantly, I say to myself, just as I feel myself about to spin, in this moment, I am well and I am alive. Healing power, supernatural, miraculous healing power course through my veins. They live in me and all around me, and I'm okay. And so it is. This is the parts that we can control. This is how we exercise agency, even in the time of challenge. This is how we can stay focused on not losing. Thank you, Dr. Chaupette. Those precious things that we have gained, that we fought so hard to get to, like an element of our sanity, right? We can keep those things by consciously choosing to back away from the triggering stimuli and stay focused in the seat of control and power, which is to speak well and light into and of ourselves.
It really is something to, I found that tremendous as well as my, you know, I do a partnership with a hospital organization, and, you know, we put out videos, and the videos this month was about mental health, and it's the videos, I sound like I'm an Instagram influencer or something. My new video is about to drop, but really in the middle of this video talking about mental health, I just stopped. And I was like, you know, my mental health isn't great right now. It's not great. And it was such a you talking about like overwhelming spirit, right? Like, and those ancestral healing powers in you. I felt like maybe it was in my ancestral sort of saying, like, James, real talk, boo, like, pause. You're doing a video on mental health and you're all cheery and happy, but you're not. what is actually the powerful message that people are going to get out of this? The powerful message is, I'm not great. And here's the things that I do to try to keep myself just above the fray to get through what I need to get through with those layers of other oppressors, like you said, Dr. Chaupette, about how COVID is feeling like another oppressor on top of us, one that we maybe had already dealt with, and now we have another one. And so it was very powerful to acknowledge that and to be okay with that. And it actually helped tremendously to just say those things and be done with it and get it out. And that, I'm learning, is something for me that is very powerful, a tool for me to deal with my mental health and create a wellness sort of journey through all of this. And I wondered, Nancy and DeMarco, I'm going to come back and pick on you guys a little bit. What sorts of things in your journey are your tips and tricks, right? Some things, someone said the old make the bed trick a few weeks ago too. And I mean, I'm 42 years old. I've never really made my bed my entire life, but because of COVID and my stress and my partner finally begging me enough, I decided to start making the bed, and I'll be damned if that hasn't changed everything. It is the craziest thing because it's one of those controllables, those things I can control. So I just, in your journey in general in mental health, but also specifically during COVID-19, Nancy, I'll start with you. What are some of those things that you can provide to the individuals watching right now that are some of the things that help you sort of stay above the fray with your mental health?
Well, what I do in the morning when I get up is I make my bed. And then I get to put my makeup on, my face, and I put on a dress. Because looking nice makes me feel better, that I can face the world. Because like there are days that I don't even know what day it is because of the old saying, and that's how I start my day. And it really helped me. And then I make phone calls. And some days I would call somebody on a video chat, and we'll have coffee and video. It's like one-on-one like this, and we're having coffee and we chat. Or lunchtime. Since, I am a hugger. I miss the touch of somebody. And I can't, I can't be around too many people. So I Zoom a lot. I go to a lot of meetings, and I volunteer also on Zoom. So it just keeps me busy. And like what Valerie said, you know what? I'm alive. I have all this things. I'm HIV positive. I have pain. I have this and that. But you know what? I'm doing better than a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And like, I'm 22 years sober. I can't complain.
Mm-hmm. How about you, DeMarco?
I have a pretty similar type of practice. I wake up, I make my bed, and one of the things that has been very, very amazing piece for me is that I create an identity statement. And I also allow myself to go into whatever feeling that I'm having. I allow myself to go into it, but I also give myself a time frame. So if I'm feeling a little upset, if I'm feeling angry, if I'm feeling frustrated, okay, you got an hour to be frustrated, and then we're done. But then I also, after that, I create, my identity statement is, and I do this, every few days or something like that. And like today, I start with I am, and I put I am loving, I am giving, I am, caring, I'm healing. And then I go to I am a friend, I am a coach, I am a healer. And then I put, how do I? So then I put I live with integrity, I live with peace, I live with honesty. And then I put it all together at the end of it before I even start my work. And I put, I am loving, caring, giving, peaceful. I am a friend, I'm a brother, I'm a healer. I choose to live with integrity, peace, and honesty. And I am willing to become a better version of myself each day so that I may serve my purpose. That brings me back, and then I light my sage, I take 6 deep breaths, reset myself, and I'm better. So that's what I do to help myself, especially in those moments of, when the anger or the frustration or the fear, because, as soon as I wake up, you live in a past. You live in a past moment that could have been so great for you. And then you look at what's going on right now. You need to remind yourself who you truly are in your core. That's what I do.
Dr. Chaupette, how is this relating to sort of the conversations you're having with your clients right now in terms of I mean, I think we have such a, and pardon, there's sirens outside of my house. If y'all can hear those, my apologies. But there are, I mean, that is an amazing exercise, DeMarco. It also, I feel like for someone like me who, listen, I'm about to turn in my dissertation tomorrow, but even tackling something like that feels almost too far away for me sometimes, where I have to go I'm in awe a little bit. I'm like, wow, I don't think I could sit down and write those statements about myself right now. It just feels like so much, right? But I can start with my bed. And so I feel like there's this spectrum, right? And I just am kind of wondering, for those carrying a diagnosis of HIV and all these different intersections, Dr. Chaupette, and now with that big oppressor over all of us, what are some of the things that you're having conversations with your clients about in terms of coping strategies and mechanisms and things like that?
Well, I think the common themes are stay in the present, but reflect on the past. And when you reflect on the past, you reflect on not what I should have did, could have did, the shoulda, couldas, but how did I get to this point in my life? How did I make that happen? And question the thoughts about, well, somebody made it easy for me, because even if they did, you still had to do the work. So I also encourage most of my patients are in recovery from dual diagnosis, mental health issues and addiction. So I ask them, who have they mentored today? Who have they reached out to today? Again, it's that purpose thing. And it's about giving, because most of you on this call know that the more you give, the more you receive. And giving is totally a receiving gift. So we talk about today, and we talk about it in the context of the past and how strong you are, as opposed to maybe if I'd have dealt with my mental illness earlier, I would be in a better place today. And I try to normalize the process of dealing with a psychiatric disorder, because I too struggle with depression, DeMarco, and it's a beast. And I'm out to everyone about it. And I take a psych med and I'm out to everyone about it. And I tell my patients, people can't shame you if you don't have shame. People can't shame you if you don't have shame. Like most of us on this call, probably, and almost all of my patients, a lot of this stuff's been genetically inherited and normalized from the sources of our genetics. So stop beating yourself up. Every day, do an inventory of who might I have helped today and how, and most importantly, what did I learn about myself today? How strong am I? How can I be honest about what I really feel? I tell a lot of my patients, because I work in Los Angeles, so I tell them, would you please stop acting? I want to talk to the real person. Can the real person please come forward? And they laugh. As you know, humor is very healing, and it's been one of my coping strategies to just get through the work, because in the early days of HIV, it was brutal, to say the least, for obviously the patients and their families, but certainly for providers. So I guess in summary, what I would say is have no shame about who you are. Understand its origins. Walk with your head up. Addiction is a brutal illness that is a lifelong struggle. And it is fed by change. The more you lose structure, if you're trying to be in recovery from addiction and or other psychiatric illnesses, the greater the relapse beast is. So yes, make your bed. Yes, get a DIY haircut like I do. Make yourself feel better in ways that are healthy. I teach my clients all the time, okay, you're about to make a decision. The fork in the road is this a self-enhancing choice or is that a self-defeating choice? You tell me. And often just that simplicity of the fork in the road, it is a visual that for some of my folks who need that even more than the verbiage to actually decide where they're leaning to and why. So authenticity, honesty, think about your choices. One of the things that supposedly separates us from other species is that we can think about our thinking. Although we have some examples now in power who have no idea that they should be engaging in that kind of behavior. Hallelujah, Valerie.
Yes. Speak on it. Right. Come on, preacher.
So we have been, all of us probably on this call have been ashamed of who we were for so long. We've lived in secrecy. We've blamed ourselves. We never put our mental health or our addiction in the context of our biological family of origin, the lessons they taught us, and the deprogramming that we're going to have to do to decide what we actually think. Because for a lot of my folks, I say that thought that you just had, is that yours, or did that come from a power source that obviously you listened to because they fed you and gave you life? We have to decide what pearls of wisdom are truly pearls of wisdom and what other pearls are, and most likely they're pearls of poison, control, and dehumanization.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the gist that runs through most of my work with them. There are a ton of online meetings, so don't tell me you can't find a meeting. Hello, I'm not buying that crap. And I often will have a teleconference call with my patients and their mental health psychiatrist so that we're all on the same page. And that should be standard of care already, but it isn't. So the more we can integrate ourselves as a team with the other members of the mental health team, the recovery team, the better the quality of care is going to be.
Excellent.
Sex addiction, which by the way is not a good addiction, even though it might sound like it. There's no such thing as a good addiction. It's an oxymoron. Okay. Right. Sex addiction, is still, in my opinion, undertreated, underdiagnosed, and poorly understood, and carries a lot of shame. And right now in Los Angeles, to my knowledge, although feel free to correct me, the bathhouses are closed. Which brings a whole, I know it sounds odd, but in my world, that is something that I have to discuss about outlets for behavior that is not either properly contained or whether or not this is more likely a bipolar manifestation than an actual sexual addiction. So I've enjoyed this time, honestly, because I get my folks to sit still long enough because they have to.
They have to
actually look at the present in the context of the past and tell me what shame you still have in your life. I always ask them, what are you holding? And I'm not talking about weapons. What are you holding? And because secrets are food for relapse. Holding secrets, not telling your sponsor you have HIV, not telling your mom that you are burdened with a psychiatric illness, PTSD, depression. Holding secrets is the antithesis, the opposite of recovery. And so this has been a time where I can work with them to say, okay, of the top 3 secrets that you're holding, because we all hold secrets,
sure,
which one is the least stressful that we can talk about? And we build up. And in the process of going from least stressful secret to most stressful secret. I inoculate them through that process of knowing they can speak the truth, that it's safe and that it needs to be spoken, because the power of a secret is, to me, it's toxic. So that's kind of the themes I'm seeing.
Very much so. Thank you for that. Thank you. I appreciate that. And this question is, you kind of brought this up a little bit earlier, and this is actually for all of the panelists. I think it would be really interesting to sort of discuss, before we go to that, by the way, everyone watching, we're getting to your questions in about 10 minutes or so, and I see that there are a couple. If you have questions for APAIT as an organization, any of the panelists, anything you would in particular would like to discuss, we are going to take about half an hour to answer your questions, and we're going to start doing that here in a few minutes. So just use that Q&A button down there on the bottom, type those questions in, and we'll get those out to the panelists here. So for everyone, for the panelists, what are those, there have to be parallels, and I know some of them seem obvious, but maybe there are not some obvious parallels between the HIV and AIDS crisis of the 80s and 90s and this virus crisis that we're having right now. And so I don't know, are there some parallels that you can sort of share with everyone here, and especially in terms of how the activism during that time can be translated into the activism that may need to be going on now?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed really clearly is we did not have a presidential message in the early days of HIV, one that was encouraging and motivating, and one that brought peace and silence to the citizenry. And yet again, today, we have presidential leadership that speaks of the vast amount of deaths in the past tense, as if he has accepted that there will be a vast amount of death, like he's accepted it. So I'm very proud of my country. We've got a ways to go, but I'm very proud of my country. I'm very proud of my state and my city, in that we have sort of presidented ourselves. We've developed systems and approaches, virtual especially, to sort of tell ourselves that we're alone, but we're together. We've had to do that ourselves because we see that clearly there is a gross lack of this presidential fathering that sometimes a country needs. That it's going to be okay, we've been through tougher. Instead, we see campaign speeches and something that sounds like, I don't know, French backward pig Latin. I mean, you don't know what it is. But we have definitely had to navigate ourselves through this critical period. And I'm very proud of us, even though we see, yes, we still have racism. We still have all of the isms. And I've said before that Americans are rather selfish. We want what we want right now. We want to get out and play right now, and it's not quite time for that. But we have sort of guided ourselves through this and developing processes of safety and re-engagement for ourselves, because just as in HIV, we're not getting it from the top. That's a clear parallel. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Valerie. Nancy, do you understand, sorry to put you on the spot here, but I just am wondering sort of about parallels that you see maybe between the early days, because my research is in HIV, and I feel like we're still in an HIV/AIDS crisis as far as I'm concerned, but the early days of the HIV and AIDS crisis in the 80s and 90s, and paralleling that with COVID-19 now.
Is that for me? You know, I was diagnosed in 1997, and I didn't know anything about HIV except for Magic Johnson and also Vac Hudson dying of AIDS. And that was all I knew about it. So, and by the time, in 1997, the protease inhibitor came out. So I didn't, I guess I was like, I felt lucky that I was diagnosed at the time where there are some medication and some ways to take care of yourself better. So it was very easy for me, and that's why also I did a lot of volunteer work and to help me understand what is HIV/AIDS. And today with this COVID-19, I get, you know, at the beginning I used to get scared. I wouldn't go out of my house, and it's like I would like go for a drive so I can see who's out or that, you know, just to see people. But I would not leave my house, and it's like, and then if I go to the store and there are people in line, I don't go because I'm afraid, you know. So I think for me, you know, finding out I was HIV was, you know, I felt like it was the end of my life. But at the same time, there I had a purpose that I, you know, there are things that I can do to help myself and to get me feel, you know, better. And with COVID, I just have to just like sit still and, you know, and wait. And like Dr. mentioned, we have a lot of Zoom meetings that I go to. I have lunch with my friends, and, you know, they're, I think for me, they are different, you know, and this one is a lot harder than being infected.
DeMarco?
You know, I have a different parallel because, you know, being diagnosed, you know, around, you know, from 2010 on, I kind of have somewhat of a millennial understanding, but not from that generation. And the one thing that I noticed, you know, growing up, you know, being a little boy during the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, I remember the commercials. And I don't know if everybody remembers the Grim Reaper coming across the screen and scaring everybody. And, you know, fear, you know, you were afraid, you didn't even know as a child what that really was, but there was this fear. And then all of a sudden, it changed from, you know, a fear for everybody, but then to a particular group. And as a little boy, I didn't know that, I didn't really know what gay was. I didn't know nothing about that. And then it moved to, you know, then in the 90s, you know, it started to move to particular groups. And then during the 2000s, when I started to come out, you know, the parallel that I kind of got from this was COVID, when it first started to come out and people started talking about it, it was everyone was getting it. But then, you know, on your social media, you was hearing, oh, Black people haven't gotten it. And then all of a sudden it became, oh, well, Black people are getting it. And once Black people were the majority, then you hear the president saying, well, let's reopen all the states. And that, for me, that's a painful, and that pisses me off, because here you are watching people protest, and the majority of protesters, you can call them Republicans, you call them what you want, but they stood at their Capitol buildings with their guns, with their right to serve God, because, well, why do we have to suffer in our homes? Well, your home is what you built. So if you suffer because of what you built, then it's on you. But you're only saying that because it's not affecting and killing your people at an alarming rate. And that's the parallel that I got, that once it no longer was attached to everyone, but was killing the majority of one group, particularly the group that I'm in and the age group that I'm in, then it was okay. And then for the first time, you know, I was in the house from March 7th until about May 12th, literally in the house. And the first time that I went outside, you know, my best friend, who's also my roommate, he had these masks and he ordered everything. And, you know, I went outside and I was masked up, and then I had the gloves on, and all I really wanted to do was jog. But as soon as I went outside, there was a man with his son. There were this couple walking their dogs. No one had masks on. I had my mask on. They looked at me like I was crazy. So here we are again, feeling vilified. I'm feeling vilified for doing the right thing. And that's the parallel of this, because when there is misinformation put out into the public, It's irresponsible journalism. And not only irresponsible journalism, but why do we have in our power structure the need to put out information first instead of the need to put out what's right? That's what's been researched. So that, because if we think about it, the one thing that we had, and this is not a political statement or anything like that, but the one thing we had during SARS and N1, H1 or something like that, the one thing that we had was leadership. We didn't know who Dr. Fossey was or how we pronounce his name. We didn't know because we listened to the medical scientists, we took precaution, and as a country, we were unified with the leadership. Now, we are just as unified with the leadership because the leadership leads with fear, with intimidation. And so we have this PTSD going outside, and mind you, come on now, I know it sounds funny, but I'm 6 foot, 235 pounds. And what in the world am I scared of from a sneeze? I'm not just scared of your sneeze or your cough. I don't want to be responsible because the first thing that I feel in my fear that I walk next to that Black guy, it must have been him because Blacks are leading in this.
And it parallels to exactly what you're saying in terms of, individuals not wanting to be sexually active with gay Black men because, everyone else's rates of HIV are plummeting right now, except for 18 to 35-year-old Black men who have sex with men, who are plateauing in the last year or so, which is great. But I don't want to have sexual relations with someone who I might find attractive mentally, physically, or both because, well, he's Black and he's a man who has sex with other men. So therefore he must have HIV. That is out there. And it's parallel to exactly what you're saying now. And all of a sudden, when this becomes an issue that is disproportionately, and why are we surprised that this is disproportionately impacting Black folks? Then all of a sudden it becomes a completely different issue for those who are in power, who are, of course, right now white. And that PTSD you bring up, DeMarco, is really interesting. And I wonder if I'm picking on you again, Dr. Chaupette, but I am realizing the gift that we have of your time. And so thank you for that. And I just, that PTSD that's maybe triggering for a lot of people, folks watching, those of us on the panel, otherwise, how do we tackle that? I mean, that's a big question, but.
The PTSD that most of us have is what's called complex PTSD, meaning that it has been long-term, multiple perpetrators, and that it is going to be a little more difficult to manage. So with this epidemic, I think what it has done is it's rekindled, for lack of a better word, old PTSD thoughts and feelings. And it's made us, again, become afraid and move into a place of reviewing our life, but from a negative perspective as opposed to a positive one. Obviously the most stark comparison between the COVID drama and all of the stuff we went through with HIV is that we had incompetent leadership for both pandemics. To the point of people dying that was never had to happen. So what I do is I try to channel my patients' rage, because rage unchanneled turns into depression. And I get them to understand that, look, you have plenty power to keep yourself healthy, keep your community healthy, and step up. And oftentimes what it does is I had one of my clients tattoo on his wrist the word breathe, because when you have PTSD, you're often not breathing, or you're breathing from the top third of your lungs. And it gives him a constant, concretized message that he's safe, which is on the other wrist. I'm safe, breathe. And I think the other stark parallel, which is more positive, obviously, is that we are way stronger than we know. And we came through the HIV epidemic with PrEP and PEP and TASK and all kinds of acronyms that honestly I never thought I'd live to see.
Amen.
So we are warriors. We've been warriors since we came out of the womb, and we know how to be warriors. And we know to rely on ourselves and our immediate community because they are genuinely motivated to understand our contextual experience, not talk craziness to get a vote. You know, like, you know who right now is going after the murder of the in Michigan, Minnesota, I think it is. You know, he could care less, let's be real. Call that out for what it is. It's about votes. It's not about it's about hiding your racism and looking for votes. So in summary, what I would say is that PTSD is going to be rekindled anytime we go through a trauma. I was praying recently that one trauma and one epidemic was enough to live through, because in the early days of HIV, I was heavily immersed, and I have PTSD from the work.
Sure.
When 21-year-olds were dying, you know, with very little support, if any. So here we are at another epidemic. We again have completely inept leadership who lives in a reality that is devoid of fact, proudly in his part. And we don't need him. We have what we need. Most of my patients have what they need. They just have never been told that they do. They've been shamed since little and have unfortunately internalized some of that shame and lack of self-respect. And I just help them turn it around to self-love. Hold yourself accountable. If you've run down some shit, you need to own it. Stop talking shit. So the parallels for me is that my folks are wounded again because their world is unsettled. But unlike a lot of people in this pandemic, we know what to do. And we have evidence that we know what to do, and we're strong as hell.
Amen. Amen to that. Thank you for that. We have a couple of questions. We've got about 15 minutes or so left, so I'm going to get these questions out. Thank you, by the way. If those of you watching, if you have more questions, feel free to put them in the chat, the Q&A down there. We will get to your questions. I'm better about this. Last time I did not leave enough time, so I promised I would leave time for questions this time. So first question, how do you handle the shame component when recognizing that triggers cause you to repeat old patterns of survival that are now unhealthy for you and others around you because shame can feel so heavy? So it's a little bit similar to what we were just talking about. I'll repeat it for everybody. How do you handle the shame component when recognizing that triggers cause you to repeat old patterns of survival that are now unhealthy for you and others around you? Shame can feel so heavy.
Well, what I try to do is to reframe or redefine the shame. Right? The shame represents oftentimes something that should not have happened or we shouldn't do. But if we reframe it and sort of look at one's natural response to triggers, especially if the work has not been done to replace certain behaviors with more healthier choices. And if we know for sure that those negative behaviors, such as using, that they work, they seem to hit that sweet spot of attention, then it's a natural turn to, when people are triggered, to turn to those sweet spot activities that really, that's why sex seems to really do the trick, because it fulfills all those switches of the hunt and the chase, and then the find, and then the act. Hopefully the act is good. Most of the times I hear the act is not so good, but it's the hunt and all the anxiety leading up to that, right? And so that's a natural turn to when one is triggered, particularly if the work has not been done to replace certain behaviors with ones that work equally as well, such as breathing, or like Nancy says, I make a lot of phone calls. That works. Knowing what, so I tell my clients who are willing to engage in 12-step recovery, some are not. But if you are, you should know what's your good meetings, your good Zoom meetings, your phone meetings. You should have those lined up and bookend through your day. So you have your resources lined up so that when you are triggered, and of course you will be, and you are going to turn to something that you know historically has worked, you have this other arsenal to back up some of those other behaviors that perhaps don't serve you as well long term.
Please, DeMarco.
One thing that I've learned for myself that works for me, if I could provoke thought or pass on to anyone, is that when the trigger of when you notice that the trigger of shame shows up, identify who's telling the story. And when you figure out who's telling the story, you'll realize that it's not believable, and that's who you are. Because once that shame shows up, am I that person? Am I still there? No, that's not me who's telling that story. You'll notice in your head, because sometimes actually when we're reading books, it's in the voice of someone else. So that's not your story. That shame is not yours. And it's also something that I've always said to myself, and it was so great to see doctor to say that, was that, nobody can hurt me with my truth because I own it. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to identify with that shame. That's no longer your narrative. That was a version of you. And once you start to practice that, let me just rephrase that. Once I started to practice that, I realized that every time my ego needed to be fed, it always gravitated towards the largest sum of energy. And for me, that was the shame. That was the fear. That was the degrading moments when I was a child, or when people tried to fight me when I was, gay, playing pro ball. People try to do, these things would come up. And then when I would sit with myself and I feel it come up, that's no longer my story. So as a matter of fact, I don't even got to listen to you anymore. So I can detach myself from those emotions, and then I can have a better understanding. Okay, I know what that emotion feels like within me now, but it's not mine. That's you trying to be fed, and guess what? I don't have time to feed you right now. So I'm going to move, because this is where I am. So that's one of the things that I do for myself that may help anyone that may be listening that has that.
Very powerful. Thank you. Nancy, you were raising your hand.
For me, it's hold on. For me, I'm in a 12-step program, okay, for 22 years, and I have worked the steps. They have steps that you have to do, and they have things that you need to learn. I mean, it's a hard program, and it's easy at the same time, but you just have to follow simple rules. Like for me, I don't have shame that much anymore like I used to, because on a daily basis, working the steps, there's 10 steps as taking personal inventory before you go to bed. So like what you do is review your day for that day. Like for tonight, I'm going to review my day, and that I have, and I look at it and says, I didn't do anything that, that I have to fix tomorrow. So what I do is like, I play the tape for today. And so if I did something that is not, that I feel embarrassed about or ashamed or did something wrong, I can go to bed and tell myself that, I can fix this tomorrow. I will not do the same thing tomorrow. By doing that, you program, it's basically programming yourself, to do the steps. And that by reviewing your day, you don't do the same mistake for the next day. And that helps for me.
I really like that. I like that a lot. Dr. Chaupette, any thoughts?
Lots. So I wanted, before I forget, I just want to take a moment to congratulate Nancy on 22 years.
Absolutely.
I'm super proud of her.
That is huge.
And she knows it. And I'm giving you a virtual hug, which is the best I can do. And may you have 22 more that are even better than the first. So with shame is an activating emotion, and it sits at the fork of the road. It's going to activate you to feed it, which we heard smartly. Hell no, I'm not feeding you. You're self-defeating. I'm looking for self-enhancement. So acknowledge what the message, what the shame is from. Is it your own thinking? Is it your religion's thinking? Is it your parental figure's thinking? And what was the purpose of you being programmed that way, to feel ashamed of having sex with the same gender or drinking into excess? You have to, I think, examine the source so you can depower it, because shame is usually driven by secrets. Secrets are toxin. And if you can visualize it as you put your two hands down on the table and you see your two thumbs come together, it's sitting in that V. That's what I visualize for my patients. And that V is going to open up, and it's either going to go right or left. Is it going to activate you and win over your soul again? Or are you going to say the you know what word and hell no, I'm not giving you my soul, my integrity, and you need to go find some other poor soul to torment because I'm done with you. You brought me nothing but insanity. You have to talk to it. Leave me the hell alone. I'm living authentically. I'm living honestly. I am serving the community. I'm serving God. I'm doing God's work. Whatever makes you feel authentic in your verbiage. Speak to shame. Call it the hell out. Know that it's a pearl of poison, and it's trying to activate you so you lose power over your own life.
Mm. I'm sort of reflecting on talking to it, because there are times when that's been an instinct.
Yeah.
Around the different shame patterns that I deal with, but the instinct is, I don't always listen to that instinct, because I feel like if I talk to it, I actually give it power. If I talk to it, I actually am acknowledging that it's there. I'm almost speaking it into existence, rather than talking to it to speak it out of existence, right? To move it away. And so you caught me there a little bit, and I really appreciate that there's—
James, can I give you another point of view?
Please, because you rocked my world 2 weeks ago, Valerie, so you rock it again, please.
So here's another point of view. So I think it's very important, especially for those of us who are healers, to call a thing and to call a feeling, and to acknowledge, while I'm in a great deal of fear or I am in shame, but I am an interfaith minister, right?
Yes.
Jesus said to us to resist temptation, right? But in order to resist a thing, you notice it. The resistance piece speaks metaphysically to the attention degree that we give the thing that we see. So it's not saying that we walk around in a delusion that we don't have feelings, that we're not activated, we don't have shame, we don't have trauma histories, none of that. We notice it, and then we go immediately into our tools. And one of the tools that Nancy just gave us is to speak directly to it. And I would suggest even that when you speak into it, you don't just speak to the challenge that it has been, but you speak to who you are in the presence of it. I have shame, but I'm powerful. And look at how I'm dealing with my shame. I am standing on my own 2 feet. I'm feeling my feelings, but I'm breathing my way through my feelings. And I'm about to make a phone call. That you don't just have a fighting conversation with the feeling and boost it up and give it points as to how much havoc it has wreaked on your life, but you speak into it the truth of who you are in the presence of it. So we're not ignoring our shame. We're just not giving it our full throttle of attention. We're seeing it and then resisting it and moving into solution-focused thinking and being.
and not fighting it. I love what you say about that, because that's I'm a little bit of a fighter. So my instinct would be, all right, well, if I'm not going to speak you into existence, then I'm going to speak you out of it, and I'm going to fight you out of it. But
the fight that you have is with the absence or the presence of your belief. That's the muscle that you are building. You are building your, as I call it, your muscle of certainty. I am strong. I am going to be okay. Why? Because I'm okay in this moment, right? I'm okay in this moment. I'm a little panicked and I could have a seat. I sure could use a deep breath. I'm shook. I'm shook. But what are my resources? First of all, let's turn off CNN. That's not speaking to us. That's speaking to a much stronger ear than we operate with. What's the other truth? I am powerful because I breathed today and I'm getting ready to breathe again. We speak truth to it, not just truth about it. And we certainly don't act like it's an elephant in the room who's dancing and doing somersaults, but that we don't see it. That's not how you not speak to it and thus give it life. It has life because it's in your consciousness. It's active. You feel it. Now you've got to address it. And you address it by speaking to who you are in the presence of it. And if you're not certain of that, come to a therapist, baby. We got you.
Exactly. DeMarco, you had thoughts about this?
Well, you know what? It's interesting, because I've been taking notes on everyone. I'm sorry, I'm a note taker. But it's something that that Valerie said that also sparks in me, because what you were saying is something that I used to do. If I talk to it, not only do I look crazy, but I feel it's wrong with me because I give it life. But the truth of the matter is, avoidance is a very large energy. And what you avoid, because only positive vibes. Guess what? Only positive vibes don't give you the lessons that you are supposed to learn to overcome that moment in the situation. So guess what? Same script, different cast. You will repeat that lesson because you can't go A to D and think that it's okay. You have to go A step 1, 2, B step 2, 3, 4. Don't skip your lessons, because also if you skip a lesson, somebody else misses a blessing from the lesson you were supposed to get. So you kind of mess up that timeline as well. So, I just wanted to just piggyback on, avoidance is not an opportunity for growth. It will keep you held captive and a prisoner to that secret of shame.
That's amazing. Thank you. So yeah, I was asked to facilitate these sessions this May as a part of being a member of the advisory board for APAIT, but these have been an absolute blessing for me. And honestly, I know this is part of my role is to facilitate, but I also feel like it's been an hour and a half of free therapy for me every week for 4 weeks. So thank you, Valerie. You should probably send me a bill. There's a couple of, we have some more questions here. I want to get to these before we go. Very good. Folks are just kind of talking about acknowledging shame allows you to figure out how to move past it. And like what we were just talking about here, practicing self-love, not conceit, will free you from the need of love from others. Once you realize that you want someone as opposed to needing someone, that's a whole different level of self-worth. I'm going to stop with that question. It's not a question, it was a statement, but I feel like there's something there, and in the interest of time, we only have about 5 minutes left. We talked about sex earlier, and it's not happening for a lot of people during COVID-19, which the virus impacting our sex lives is something very familiar to this community. And what can we just speak a little bit to that? Maybe Dr. Chaupette, if you have some final thoughts on this, about this, like this sort of need for interaction, sexual interaction with other individuals around the virus right now that's not happening. Is that an opportunity for folks to sort of be a little bit introspective about
But James, before Dr. Chaupette offers her, we cannot assume that because I'm not getting none, and James, sadly, you may not be getting none either, but the people are sexual. They are indeed having sex.
They
They
are.
are ignoring COVID. They are
They
ignoring all of the risk factors, and
You
they
right.
are engaging.
You
So,
right. I think it's the
I'm
nurse
holding you up, Jane.
No, and thank you. I think it's the nurse practitioner, public health official in me that does not want everybody to be having sex. But thank you for speaking truth on that, Valerie. But I wonder about what that interaction is like. That, you know, a lot of us in our time, in our past, and maybe now have derived so much self-worth of avoidance of that shame, dealing with those different shame issues sexually with others, and that's not really happening for some folks now, or maybe it is.
I can speak generically in the sense that some of my folks who use sex to try to find love, which is better known as Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, are able to explore that now, because now they're left with self-love, and I'm not just talking exclusively about masturbation, but they're left with self-love. And it drives them to give me an opportunity to explore with them why they are interested in using sex to find love in a city that's built on the movie industry and the porn industry. Let's start with that, right? So I think for some of my folks, the timeout, so to speak, is an opportunity to look at whether or not they are seeking intimacy or seeking physicality. And oftentimes I see that there is a separation between intimacy and physicality, because it is more about the physical act than it is about the person that you are electing to be with. In the world of sex work, sex recovery work, we talk about, are you looking for a vase for ejaculate? Or are you looking for someone that you can love, respect, and develop a relationship with? Which is kind of some of the guideposts for unhealthy sex and healthy sex. So this is a window of opportunity for me with some of my folks, my patients, to talk about how this decline in activity, if that's the case, what is it revealing to them about themselves and about what they really want. Because, you know, in some of my gay male patients, they would tell you that I always bring to the light of day the messages from the gay male community about sex is better than intimacy. And it's okay to sort of trade off your desire for affection, intimacy, respect, love, to have the act of sex. So, and it's a place of entrapment. Oftentimes I find that they really are dying for intimacy, but the quick fix will never get them that.
Sure, of course. Well, thank you. Just as we sort of wrap up, I think everyone who has attended, who's watching right now, and who has attended multiple of these sessions as well about My Wellness Journey Begins With Me from APAIT. Dr. Chaupette, thank you so much for being here. DeMarco Majors, thank you for being here. Nancy Shearer, Reverend Valerie Spencer, just honestly, send me a bill, or the check is already in the mail. Valerie has done got me together all throughout this entire thing, and I really appreciate that. And it speaks to the amazing individuals associated with APAIT. Jake, obviously, for helping put this together. Jury Candelario for manning the ship and being our fearless leader. Jasmine for your strategic partnerships. Your spirit, Jasmine, your spirit does something to all of us, and we really appreciate that so much. Everyone really being involved in all of this. And just if you want to know more about APAIT, you can visit us online at apaitonline.org for more information about accessing our behavioral health and housing services, as well as our HIV testing and primary care linkage services, which are currently back online. So we've never really closed, but things are starting to open up in a different way for APAIT right now. And for those of you watching, if you're ever really overwhelmed or in crisis, need to reach out, remember there are resources there for you. The National Suicide Hotline is actually a really great place to start and available 24/7, 1-800-273-TALK or 1-800-273-8255. The Trans Lifeline is also there for the unique needs of our trans community brothers and sisters. It's the translifeline.org. You can also call the Trevor Project as well, specifically for LGBTQ plus folks at 1-866-488-7386. Thank you again to all of our panelists and to everyone involved with this. We really, really appreciate it so much. Thank you for those watching who asked questions as well. And May being Mental Health Awareness Month and May being the month we kick off this campaign of My Wellness Journey Starts With Me, this is not the end. Just because May is coming to a close does not mean this journey stops. And so I hope everyone has been able to learn something from this and we continue to support each other in the community going forward. So thank you all very much. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Everyone.